I had days, and I can say this now we're here, but I used to cry after some shifts from how busy it was. I used to
Oh,
sit in the toilet and just cry like, why did I do this to myself? Why am I here? Why don't I just go live in Sudan? For me, it was a moment of happiness and also sad because my granddad had passed away just before. And I remember literally just turning into tears and crying because I knew he would have been very proud to see me graduate on that day. And before I go on the stage, I think I just end up going to the toilet about 50 times. And you're like, oh my God, I don't know. Do you think that joke's okay? Is it not? And you're scared. But when you go on stage, I'm like,
Salam alaikum. I am Ahmed Attar, and this is my first episode hosted in English in podcast Petroly. My guest today is Hassan Gali. He's a former doctor and policy advisor and also comedian. What is your last show in English?
my last one?
Show as a comedian in
I
Comedy Pod.
think about 2 weeks ago.
How was it?
It was great.
Mm.
Really cool. Really good. It went really well. I think it's a growing, let's say, scene in Saudi Arabia, but it is one that is on the way up, let's say.
So your career, all it included three things: doctor, advisor, and comedian.
Kind of,
I
yeah.
want to start. يعني, what is your first job?
My first job was when I was at school. That was my first. I started working early. My first job, I worked as a sales rep for Pampers. And interestingly, right opposite Comedy Pod in Al Uthaim. I think, I can't remember how old I was. I was like 11 or 12. And I used to have to stand in the aisle for the Pampers and say, this is Pampers. And I used to have that, you remember the blue thing that you pour there? And this is Pampers. It is better than any other diaper that you might be using to use. And please use it. So that was my first job. Not a lot of people appreciated me when I was trying to sell them Pampers, but it was one of those things where it starts to get you to know the value of work, the value of having to go out there, how to deal with people, how to speak to people, who do you give samples, who do you sell to? And I think it was really...
How much your salary was?
Man, I think I got in like 2 weeks of work, like 1,000 riyals or 1,000. I felt I was rich. I was ready to buy a car. Told my dad I'm going to move out. I'm going to start a business now. But yeah, it was our first salary.
Your childhood in Riyadh?
Yes, so I was born in the UK, and I came to Riyadh when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I left for university. So I was sort of born and bred, not born, but grew up, bred in Riyadh since I was about 6. I left when I was about 16 or something. So I've spent a good period of my life in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
How was the high school?
It was fun. The thing is, it was an international school. So the nice thing about it is it was at the time where you had schools which are either boys only, girls only, but then you had international schools where it was mixed between boys and girls. But more importantly, it was a mix between everyone from everywhere in the world. Like I had friends from Indonesia, I had friends from the Philippines, from the US, Canada. And I think that played a big role in my comedy because you know how people behave. And like a big part of my comedy is speaking to different cultures in a way, you're doing impressions of accents. And I always say when I do an accent, I always remember somebody from school or somebody I grew around with. I remember how they spoke, and you have and you also what are the things that are unique to them. So I think it was. I went initially to the British school in Riyadh, and then I was in a school called King Saud International School, and then at the end of it, I ended up in a school called Ghana International School, which is a very interesting part of my life. Yes.
Did you remember anything interesting in this period?
In school, I used to get into trouble.
Uganda specifically.
In Ghana International School. Oh yeah. Ghana International School was fun, man. I remember when I came to school, people would. It was funny because you turn up and the first thing I was always the only black kid at school. my entire child. Like I was always like almost either me and somebody else. This time I was actually the lightest kid in class. People were coming up to me, this light skinned guy. Like this is not the right school for you. But I mean, um, it was. I remember getting myself into trouble at school because actually the principal was also Sudanese, and I never had that experience where the principal actually knows your dad personally, and they'll call him on his phone. And I remember I had a friend of mine, two friends of mine, uh, Muhammad Attar and Sarwar. Um, we wanted to leave school early. It was exams, and we're like, we're going to leave school. I'm like, listen, let's just go to the guy at the door. He won't know the difference. And we got caught out because Attar decided that he was going to write our names to the security guard. Please let Muhammad Al-Atta, Sarwar, and Hassan Gali out of class. And we got stopped by the guy. And you can't deny it. And he went to the principal. And from my bad luck, my mother turned up at school the same day to speak about something. And she found us both all sitting outside as if we were going to prison. And I'm like, yeah, maybe not the wisest thing to do when you're going to commit a crime. Maybe don't write your name down there. But the memories, there was a lot of memories at that school. I remember getting chased by my teachers around for doing stuff. But it was.
What was your favorite subject?
History.
Hmm.
History is my favorite subject. I remember, I can't remember at school, his name was Sean, and he was an Irish guy, and he used to teach us history, and he would be, Hassan, you need to understand that World War was not a joke, because I was always a class clown. And I remember making jokes even during, we talk about World War I, World War II, and he'd be like, Hassan is not a funny thing to do. You're not a funny guy. It's in the back of the class. Don't play. It's a joke. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, man. But I remember he actually pushed me a lot, and he used to pick on me a lot until I actually got one of the highest grades in history. But despite that being my favorite topic, I think, coming from a Sudanese household where my dad is also a doctor, I had no option of going down that path. You are either going to be a doctor, or a doctor. You had no other option. And especially being the eldest brother. The rest of my brothers, they sort of changed and diversified, but you had only the option of you're going to be a doctor or nothing else, So that was the interesting bit in school.
How was the university?
University was great because there was two. So initially I was going back for university. The plan was to go back to the UK, or I would do at that moment, Sudan was booming. Sudan was actually a thriving economy. It was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And my dad was planning on moving, the whole family were planning on moving back. And I remember my late granddad.
2000.
This was 2002, 4, something around that sign. It's like it was after 11th September. Because I was planning on going back to the UK, but it was a time where, we had a lot of friends and relatives who were living in the UK, US, who actually got, they were targeted, whether by the authorities or by people. And, it was the war on terror time. And, being somebody with the name of Hassan Muhammad Hassan was not really a welcome thing in the West. So I moved back to Sudan, and I can say it was one of the most beautiful periods of my life. People always think that you're going to struggle. It was a struggle. Well, it wasn't easy, but it was fun. And you get to learn so much more from being there outside of university. I think university was probably 20% of the education I had. The rest of it was really outside, interacting with people, spending time with my granddad, knowing, reading culture, getting to know your own family, being involved in debate unions, being involved in discussion groups. It really gets you to become a well-rounded individual. And I think also somebody like myself, I don't know, I think the term for it is TCK, third culture kids, who, you're from everywhere and nowhere because you've lived in the West, but you're not actually 100% West. You've lived in Sudan, but, they see you as, the Khawaja. So it kind of helps you in that moment of creating your identity and knowing, actually, this is where I'm from originally. This is where my culture, these are my people, this is my land. And, so it does create that. Again, it doesn't mean that you don't belong anywhere else. I think everywhere I live or everywhere I grew up, I feel a sense of belonging to that area. and I see it as home. I live in Riyadh right now, and I see this as home because there's memories. I was like, oh, I remember doing something on this street.
العثيم.
Al Uthaym, this is my first job, you know? And the nice thing about it is and then you go back to the UK and the same thing, you know, like, yes, you know, but there are places where you see, you know, there is, and that's what we are as humans at the end of the day. You know, you belong to where you live or where you've had memories. And that's what life ends up becoming. So Sudan really created a lot of memories. It created a lot of belonging. It gave me an insight into the difference. Like, why is a country like Sudan, where it's got beautiful people, beautiful country, why is it not stable? Why is it not where it can be at a development level? Why is the UK the UK? And that period of me living in Sudan really shaped what I wanted to do later on in life. You know, my career shift from medicine to elsewhere. That I realized that a country like Sudan, with everything that it's got, with all the inputs, the land, the gold, the oil, everything, why did it not translate into prosperity for the people of Sudan? And that was one of the reasons why I changed from medicine into public policy, because I thought, you know what? Why are we where we are? We are where we are because of poor decision making, whether it's at a high level, a medium level, or decisions made for us, or at the individual level. And that's why I thought we need more people who can do public policy, more people who can understand the dynamics of Sudan, not coming in with, you need to do this. You know, it's like a PT turning up and say, you need to have a six pack. Well, I can't walk, man. Like, you can't. So that's what the period I lived in Sudan really shaped my future career
Okay,
decisions.
before getting deeper in your transition story, I want to ask you about your granddad. You have mentioned your granddad.
Yes.
What do you learn from your granddad?
Yeah. My granddad he's a great man. He's a great man. And I think you learn a lot of, one of the first things you learn is the morals. He was a very, very well-moraled man. He was a very senior government official. He was the governor of Central Bank of Sudan. He was the sort of CEO of the biggest football club in Marikh, FC.
مريخ the planet or
Not the planet.
the city? The city, yeah.
The football club. Not even that. So you learn, and from him you learn something, a lot of wisdom, because there is, I think right now you realize, and I think you only realize the stuff that you've learned once you sort of progressed in life. What do I mean by that? For example, the way he used to look at problems, the way that he would deal with, and just because he was at a time where he left his job as a governor of central bank, and he was a very well qualified economist, and he faced a lot of lashback because of, again, Sudan was a very politically, say, polarized country. He wouldn't. One of the first things he taught me was that revenge is not always the answer. That you need to be able to forgive. You need to be able to be merciful. You need to be able to progress forward in things, because there was a period in time, I remember one of the stories that he told me, that there was a revolt inside the bank for him to be fired by a specific ideological group within the bank. And when he was reappointed as governor, and when he was reentrusted to be there, these three people who were working with him, or who were trying to get rid of him, he brought them in. They thought he was going to fire them. And he said up to them, he's like, okay, what has happened has happened. I am not going to take revenge against you. I'm not going to fire you. Please carry on, get on and do your jobs. So you see him, you learn from him as that aura. And I think the honesty, he was a very, very honest man. I remember the thing that I always used to find pride in was that despite him being a senior government official, the car that he used to belong to the bank, nobody was allowed from the family to get into that car. After 3 p.m., nobody was allowed to touch the car, because that was government. That was government property. It's not. No, you were not going there. He And I think there's so many stories to say. When he would go on holiday, I remember even when we were young, when he used to live in the UK, when he would travel, and if he would come there, he would get a sort of expenditure to try with, so to travel with. He'd get a certain amount, and that was to go towards your expenses. And if he would stay in our house with his daughter, my mother, my dad, he would then take that money and give it back to the bank. And these were the sort of morals that you learn from them. And I think there's a very big difference between learning by seeing and by seeing an example ahead of you, because then you actually need to live up to that. You need to be able, people are going to say, you're his grandson. You need to show the same moral high grounds that he stood in his time, in his life. One of the other funny things that I remember was he taught us not to be entitled. Despite him being who he was in Al Marikh football, I'd go to the football games with him. And he would, when I was young and I was a kid, he would let me come with him into the box. When I got a little bit older, he would say, "Here is some money, and go and get yourself a ticket on the side." I'm like, I want to come in with you. I want to join the game. He's like, "No, you don't deserve it. What have you done to deserve a seat in the box? What have you contributed to deserve that seat in the box?" And then I would go with the rest of the fans and buy my own ticket and sit there. But then after the game, I'd have to come back to him and say, "Oh boy, oh boy, please let me." Security guy, "He's my granddad." They're like, "Yeah, whatever. We believe you." And until he'd actually say, "Yeah, I'll just come through and get into the car." So I think those were some of the things. The other things, he'd teach you about Arabic. I didn't speak Arabic. I didn't read Arabic very well. And he would take me with him. And instead of, one of his ways of doing it was to make me read the newspapers for him. I would read the news. He'd bring newspapers every day, and I would have to read the newspapers in Arabic to him, and he would correct me as I go on that. So those were some of the bits. And also seeing what he used to do in charity and helping his own family members and people. There's things that you only remember. You remember now when you grow up that he was trying to teach you a lesson. Going to, to his family members, finding creative ways of, for example, one of the things that he used to do all the time was we'd go to the petrol station. And in the petrol station, say you're going to buy petrol, you're going to get petrol for £50. Instead of £50, he would say, "I would buy it for £49. And then the £1 would be for the guy who was working in the petrol station as a tip." And he would calculate it. Imagine if everybody did this at the end of the month. That's £300. That's his rent paid for him out of these things. So finding creative ways of doing charity, of helping people, and being merciful. Like some guy drove once into his car and bust his tire just out of no. And I remember, and this is it just came back to me right now. Instead of him getting angry, "And you broke my car, and you had a nice Mercedes, and you punched my tire," he's like, "Why are you doing this, my son? Why are you doing this? Why are you behaving like this? Why are you breaking down other people's property? Come, and what do you do in your life?" "I'm doing this, I'm doing this." He's like, "Come with me. I'm going to buy you a bucket. I'm going to buy you some soap, and you're going to start doing your own work and working and cleaning cars." And that's what the way he would change anger into mercy, into opportunity, and that's the things that I learned from my late grandfather. Allah
Coming
yarhamah.
back to your career story, did you remember your first day at university?
Yes, I do.
Mm.
I do. So I went to a university called University of Medical Sciences and Technology, Mahmoud Hameda, Sudan. And I remember the first day walking in, there was a very long pathway. And you come into the main door, there's this very long pathway. And it's, I was going in and like, "Oh my God, I'm at university now. I'm not at school no more. I don't need to wear a uniform."
Mm.
There's people here doing different things. Oh my God, what is this? I am going to become a doctor. I can't believe this. I'm in medical school. What? And it was scary, but it was also exciting because we joined as a small group initially because we came a bit later than everybody else. I think there was about 9 or 10 of us. And I remember that feel that now I'm a university student. I'm cool. I'm a grown person. I'm an adult. I have my own money. I have my own thing.
Mm.
But we were young as well. So the things that you think about now, like, "Oh my God, that was so cringe. Why was I thinking like this. um, but it was scary, but it was exciting at the same time.
Mm,
But because I went to university more than once, I've actually lived this again and again. So in different universities. So
mm.
um, yeah, that's what I
Any
can.
professor that you don't forget?
Um, from my undergrad,
No, yes.
from undergrad. Okay, from my undergrad, well, there's plenty of them, and some of them are with us, some of them passed away. Allah yarhamhum.
Mm.
Uh, but one that sticks out is Professor Mustafa Idris. He teaches biochemistry and
Biochemistry.
biochemistry,
Mm.
and he knew everyone by name and by
By
detail,
history.
by history, by everything.
Mm.
And I remember he used to give us such a hard time because he would also make fun of us in class. He'd stand you up and he would literally roast you. If you don't know something, Hassan Gali, انت وين like he'll be like the guy and he'd stand you up. And I remember he used to make us stand up, stand in the front, and unless we get an answer right, then we sit down. So it will be like the ridicule of the class. But it was in
Mm.
a way that I think now that wouldn't pass because people are like, oh my God, I don't feel so. But that at the time, we used to find it hilarious. We used to be scared. And that used to force us to go and, I don't want to come to this guy's tutorials not having been prepared. But although him being harsh, he would always give you the best advice you can get in life, in studies, in opportunity. He was always available and always humble, despite of how senior he was. He became the dean of medical school at the University of Khartoum, which is a very prestigious position. But whenever you'd reach out to him, he was always there to sort of give you advice as a teenager. You were young at the time, pretty much you were a teenager. But he would give you small bits of insights into life. This is not how the world works. This is not how things go. Focus on this, focus on that. And he wouldn't take anything personal. Even if you weren't good, he wanted to see you succeed. So he's one of the professors I remember very, very well from
What
university.
was your favorite course
My favorite course
that you enjoyed?
in medical school?
Yes.
It's a very good question.
Mm.
I wasn't, I'll say in medical school, academically, I wasn't really that
Mm.
focused, but I'd say the course I enjoyed the most was, let's say, internal medicine. That was after like towards the later years because I found it very, 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 very satisfying that you were able to see patients with real illness, real, and because you would go onto the wards and you would see real disease and like the idea of how do you come up with a diagnosis, how do you think of this, because it was more of a realization of all the stuff that you did in the past. You would do pathology by all the stuff and anatomy, physiology, so you understand that. And it was only then shown when you started working in hospital. So I really enjoyed internal medicine because we also had a lot of very good doctors, and you would see a lot of illness that required a really strong sense. I think that was one of the things that made us at the time very good, even when we went later on into future training, was the degree of pathology and degree of illness that we saw. Like you were able to diagnose things straight away. You were very on point. You'd see illnesses that you would not see anywhere else in the world. And I really enjoyed the internal medicine course that we had, and I thought I'd become an internal medicine specialist, but I did not eventually.
Mm. Did you remember the graduation day?
Yes, I remember graduation day.
Mm.
I remember because we used to have a way where the results would come out, and
Oh.
we would sit down. You would sit there. There used to be like a board meeting, and the board meeting would be on this. So, and you'd be sitting down the stairs. So it looked like something from Lord of the Rings, where somebody's going to come down with a piece of paper and
Mm.
give you, and everyone is scared and everybody's worried. And I remember my way was always of dealing with stress was joking. So I was very stressed, and I had a friend of mine who had big ears, and I remember pushing his ears towards the boardroom. I'm like, "Come on, can you get any signals from what's being discussed in the boardroom?" And once the results came out, we were ecstatic, happy. For me, it was a moment of happiness and also sad because my granddad had passed away just
Mm.
before. And I remember literally just turning into tears and crying because I knew he would have been very proud to see me graduate on that day. And I remember he always used to call me mini doctor because I wasn't really a doctor, you know. But now I was like, you know, if he was alive, he
A
would have
real
been
doctor.
a real. I'm a real doctor, a real unemployed doctor, but still, you know, a real doctor at the
Mm,
time.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
What happened after graduation?
So after graduation, I decided I was either going to do my internship in Sudan, or the option was everyone was most people were, you know, do I now go abroad? Do I go and find? Do I go to the US? Do I go to the UK? Or what do I do? So I went straight away to the UK and I did my licensing exams, the PLAB. So and I passed straight away, and I started applying for foundation year one, which is the equivalent of training internship. And I got a foundation year one placement. And then my eyes were always on. I want to go to the US because I think the US is. I think everyone who grew up in Saudi Arabia at a specific time thought America was going to be the best place to. You want to be there, and USA, it's amazing. They've got amazing stuff, and all the shows are from there in Hollywood. But I didn't end up doing that. I ended up going to the UK and doing my foundation year one, and then foundation year two, training in the NHS in the UK.
Mm.
So
The major, what was the major? Specific major.
so when you do F1, F2, there's no major. You rotate through different specialities. And I think
Mm,
that was one of the strong parts of training in the UK,
mm, mm.
especially if you come in at junior level. It makes you very well rounded. Like right now, I can deal with, like, that's why I can answer a lot of, like, you can deal with sort of any emergency from any background. If somebody has a headache, to somebody bleeding or something, because you know, and you've rotated in medicine, in surgery, in psychiatry, in general practice. So it gives you a very well rounded approach as a doctor. And I think it is one of the best training programs in the world, I would say, especially for a junior doctor. So I always say to a lot of graduates, if they're finishing now, I was like, you know, if you do have the opportunity to do your foundation training, and it is tough, it's not easy. I remember it was not easy. I had days, and I can say this now we're here, but I used to cry after some shifts from how busy it was. I used to
Oh.
sit in the toilet and just cry, like, why did I do this to myself? Why am I here? Why did I just go live in Sudan? Why didn't I just become a,
Mm.
you know,
But did you have doubt about being a doctor?
always,
Always. Mm.
always. Because I think, especially when you start young, what you realize is that there is more to life than just being a doctor, you know? And one of the things that I realized that a lot of my friends, you know, they were doing things that were like, yeah, I'm gonna do graphic designing, I'm gonna do interior designing, and you're like, what are you gonna do? I'm gonna be a doctor, bro. Like I have no other option. I have. It's like as if it was part of your secondary training, you know.
Mm, mm,
So like you have. So I always had doubts, and I was always exploring things, and I was always looking at stuff. And I think the moment I went back to the UK was actually the only time I had independence. This is the first time I was making my own money. I was living alone. I was like, actually, now I can start thinking of doing different things. You know, I started looking at maybe if I want to go and do drama school and become an actor,
Oh.
maybe I should do. I can go into pharma. Maybe I can go into consulting. Maybe I can go into biotech. So there was always these ideas that, and I was always exploring them whilst working in the hospital at the time. But it's very difficult to sort of break into those fields, especially if you're somebody who graduated abroad in the UK. It is sort of to a degree insulated, you know, especially if you are what they call an international medical graduate. You graduated abroad and you come to the UK. A lot of industries are very difficult to break into if you are an IMG, as they say.
Mm. After rotating
After foundation one and two,
foundation.
yeah, after foundation one and two, I took a year in between where I came back to Saudi
Mm,
and I worked here for a bit because my dad was unwell during that period. But you know, he recovered and he became well. So
alhamdulillah.
I went back. After foundation year two, I decided I'm not going to do my core training. I wanted to do a master's degree because I said, actually, an accident happened in between where it really changed my perspective on things in life. I went to Sudan for a holiday, and I was at a wedding. And when I was at that wedding, I was supposed to go with a few friends to have dinner. And it was during the time where there was a lot of protests. There was protests going on. There were, it was 2012. 21st of June 2012. So, uh, 13 years ago, as of today, pretty much. Um, I was in the car, and then what happened was some guy came from behind and crashed into us. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
So crashed into us from behind, and we came out to see what happened. And as soon as we came out of the car, we just got beaten up by some people. We didn't know who these people were. I was like, "What is going on? What is happening?" And I remember, being put under, and we pretty much got kidnapped. Got
Mm.
kidnapped. We got beat up. I got put in the back of a pickup car, truck, and we were taken into custody at the time, and we were tortured. We were tortured. We were spat on. We were walked over, and I thought I was gonna die.
Mm.
I had people putting guns in my head and saying, "Say your last words,"
Oh.
and I was like, whoa, what is this, man? I've never had to deal with any of this. I'm not even into politics. I'm not a politician. I'm not active. I was just going to go have fool. Like, what a way to die. So
What was your last word?
my last word was like, oh,
Help!
help me, please. I had nothing to do with this. I don't even like those guys. Of course, I can't say that. I pretend I am against everything. I was like, I stand up to the human right.
Mm.
So after that, the same night I got beat up and tortured. I lost consciousness and I was taken into hospital. And of course, the British Embassy got involved and a few people here and there got involved. And I left. And, when I went back and that was before I finished my second year of foundation training, I said, it just gives you a moment of clarity is why would I be treated like that in my own country? Why is this happening? Why would I be, walked over by people who are exactly the same skin color as me, the same religion, the same country? Some of them might even be related to me. So it just had the idea in my head was, what can I do to make sure that my kids don't go through the same experience? And I was like, is medicine going to do it? Medicine is an amazing career. It's really one of, I think, the most noble careers that you can ever do in your life. But I also believe that the world operates in a way that you need more people in different areas if you really want to bring change. The change that I can do as a doctor will be limited to my clinic, to my hospital, and maybe to treating patients. But there is way more in the world. Not everyone is sick. Not everyone needs a doctor. There's other things happening in the world that need that need thinking and need help. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to do something different. So I applied for a master's degree in public policy and global health. And I did that at Durham University, which is one of the oldest universities in the United Kingdom. And I focused my area and it opened up my mind that not everything is a hospital. Not everything is illness. Not everything is patients. And, there's economics, there's politics, there's policy, there's international relations, there's things happening in the world. So I did my first master's degree in public policy and global health. And I focused my thesis on the impact of US sanctions on Sudan's health infrastructure. I didn't want to go too far away from. And that really opened up my mind to that, sanctions are affecting how hospitals are working, how people are getting treatment. Business, your illness and your health isn't a result of you being, there's decisions and systems that work. If you're well off, you're more likely to live longer. If
Yeah.
you are, if you live in a good place, you are more likely to live longer.
If you're happy at work,
If you're happy at work,
if
all
you
these
had
things.
health, marriage.
Absolutely. And I used to compare it to, if you have a good car, you can't, having a lot of mechanics isn't going to make your car last longer.
Yeah.
You need good roads, you need good streets, you need good parking space,
Good driving.
good. And that's what I started realizing. So, and then that research that I used, I got invited to the House of Lords, London Parliament, to show the findings of my research. I wrote a report for the U.S. Congress. There was the Sudanese Businessmen Association who were trying to lift the U.S. sanctions off Sudan. So it was one of the things.
What is the headline of founding
of the research?
Mm.
The impact of the U.S. sanctions on Sudan, on the health of Sudan's children.
Mm.
That was how I how I had it. And I wanted to show that economic policy really only affects the people that are unintended by it. What do I mean? You have sanctions that are focused on, changing something with, I don't know, government or high level people, but the people who suffer are the children. The people who suffer are the women. The people who suffer are the poorest, the most vulnerable. It's not the people that you're targeting. People you're targeting really are still living their life with no problems. Actually, the funny part is the people you're targeting have apartments and villas in the US, in the UK, places where they are, but the people who are unintended were the people who are suffering. So that opened up my mind to a lot of the discussions and a lot of the
Mm.
that there's more to life than there's more to career than just hospitals. But it took me some time to sort of work on it. I went back. I went and I worked in surgery for a bit in urology, um, and I really don't know why I did urology, but I think it was because of the people who were. I realized I chose a specialty not based on the specialty, but based on the people I was working with. Amazing people. There was a guy who really inspired me. His name is Rupert Kalea. He's a Maltese urologist. He, after one operation, used to get the mop and clean up the floor afterwards. And I was like, wow, this guy's a consultant surgeon. Why are you doing that? And he was like, everybody has to take part in the game. And that humility, I think it also linked to my granddad, to the sort of stuff that you learned from him. And I was like, you know what? I want to be like this person. Although like I didn't know much about specialty. I just knew this person was a nice guy. And then I got in and I started doing operations with him and that was the thing that sort of made me stay in urology for some time. Whilst of course exploring other career avenues.
Can you explain to me what is public policies?
Public policy is a very dynamic term, but public policy is, you know, in term is it's actions that are taken by government to bring change or address issues there. And it can take a lot of different forms. It can be in the form of regulation. It can be in the form of financial. It can be subsidies. It can be in the form of uh, behavioral, so like nudging and pushing people towards certain areas. So it's a very wide range of tools that the government uses to sort of bring change. In summary,
Mm. When did you quit the
doing medicine.
medical industry?
My last day of practicing medicine, I was always practicing, but I sort of slowly was
Mm.
getting out of it. Like initially doing 5 days, then doing 4 days, then 3 days, then 2 days, then one day every 2 weeks until I completely left it. Because I think, especially when you're exploring, and I think this is like something I always say to people is like, it's really good to have something to fall back on, but it can also be counterproductive and you take your time when you're in your comfort space. So medicine was something that would, it pays well. You can carry on working as a doctor and doing other things. So after I finished my first master's at Durham, I went and I did a second master's at the London School of Economics in public policy, where it gave me and I stepped away from health. I was like, I'm not doing anything related to health.
Before getting deeper in the master, what was your dad reaction about your transition?
Initially, he wasn't too happy about it.
Oh.
um, but I think the good thing about my dad is that he is well rounded on what's happening in the world. So when you show him that I'm working on these areas and that your research is actually taken into parliament and that it's used, there is a lot of respect to that. And he's like, actually, this is, if you want to carry on doing it, carrying on doing it. Of course, he was on the opinion that I should do both. That I should carry on being a doctor, being a surgeon, and also doing public policy. I'm like, you can't marry these two careers because they're both very difficult.
Especially if you are married.
Especially, exactly.
So
Three wives is not easy, man.
Three So getting back to your second master.
Yep.
What was the experience?
Amazing. Amazing. A very, look, the London School of Economics is one of the best universities in the world in social sciences, generally speaking. this master's, the nice thing about it, it was curated for people who had experience, who worked in different careers. So my cohort, and I think the most amazing thing about the master's is my cohort. I had people from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Panama, from Colombia, from Chile, Argentina, all over the world, the US, the UK, and people who worked in different disciplines. So I learned way more from my classmates than I did from just the coursework that I was doing. And the best part about it, it was that it was like sort of that push that I needed into the world of social sciences, into the world of policy, into the world of economics, of political economy, of building state capacity. And it was really the thing that sort of switched my career around to away from medicine into a full-time public policy career.
Mm. What is your first job as a public policy specialist?
So once I finished, I decided that I'm going to go anywhere that would take me because, you look at your CV, like you've been working for so many years, but you're a doctor. You don't have experience in the field. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try. So I went to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. So which is like, it's a multilateral development. It's an MDB. It's an international financial institution. But so it does, and I think the thing that I liked about it was the bank was different to a lot, like it's different to the World Bank, different to the IFC in the sense that it worked on the private sector, but it would invest, but it also has a policy arm to it. So I'd go to a country, and it was created sort of after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The agenda was that it would transition these economies that were communist economies into market-based economies. So I went into the bank, which was my first role. So I started off as an intern, and I started off. My first job was in the European Bank for Construction and Development, EBRD, and I worked in the managing director. At the time, it was called Economics Policy and Governance Department in their office, and really, it was a very good, solid standing for someone. And I think this is something people should learn: is that if you're going to do a career shift, be willing to take a jump down or a pay step down. Because I went from somebody who was operating, at a registrar level in the hospital, running on calls and operating, to somebody who was willing to work as an intern initially. I started doing an intern. Exactly.
And the salary was
Yes, of
lower.
course. It was way lower. Your responsibilities were way lower. But it was like that Robert De Niro movie, The Intern, where you have an older guy and you're 10 years older than your boss and they're telling you to do stuff and you're like, maybe. But it's like you need to be, and it teaches you humility. And this is something, I think humility really, I think arrogance is the barrier of learning. If you're unable to step down and say, I'm willing to learn from other people, whether they're younger than me, less experienced than me, less educated than me. So I did it. I started working as an intern. And interestingly, just a few weeks in, I started getting way more responsibility than I would as an intern. At the bank, I was organizing major events with big speakers. And then I think the pivotal point was when the bank started doing their research and work on the expansion into sub-Saharan Africa. So I ended up leading that stream of work at a level which was probably, I think, 7 times lower than where I'm supposed to be. People who would learn it would be either associate level, principal level, but I was actually operating at that same level at the bank. I was managing external consultants. I was doing whole country analyses, and then I joined the bank then as a consultant to stay and carry on working on that. So yeah, that was my first experience outside of public policy in the field of public policy.
After that,
I went to a think tank called the International Growth Center, which is a think tank based between the London School of Economics and Oxford Blavatnik School, government. I worked as a state fragilities, so as a policy economist in the State Fragility Initiative, which was more of an initiative that was an intellectual outreach for governments in fragile states. And I was in charge of Sudan, my own country. And I think that was something that made me want to do it, because I always remember the reason I did this beforehand was because of what I saw in Sudan, and because of what happened there. So I got to work, and it was a very high level exposure. I was working with big names like Sir Tim Besley, Paul Collier, Professor Adnan Khan. I was, our board included people like David Cameron, former UK Prime Minister, and a lot of other and you were working on a lot of thought leadership things. I was working on taxation, fragile states, and then you work on development finance for private sector development in fragile states. How do you do business in countries that are in war or in conflict? And it was incredible. But then, unfortunately, what happened in Sudan, things started taking a downward trend, and I wasn't able to continue working on Sudan. So I decided I'm going to be true to myself, true to my, and I had to leave in a bit once things started going downhill on Sudan.
Mm. What is your current job?
So I work here as a public policy advisor in an advisory firm here. It's called White Shield. White Shield.
International.
It's a global firm, and we work mainly in policy advisory with governments. And here we work with different public institutions. Also work with the private sector companies who are looking at regulation, regulatory risk, political risk, and all that sort of stuff. But mainly focused here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Mm. What most do you like about your job?
I think the breadth of things that I think we're in an era where everybody wants to be a specialist. One thing. But the world is too complex to be seen from one lens. We need to, if you speak to somebody who works in education policy, we want more schools, we want more money for teachers, we want this. But then you speak to somebody in security, we need more defense.
We need more
spending.
podcasts.
We need more. Yeah, you speak to Ahmed, we need more podcasts, more studios, more podcasters. So everyone's going to look at it from their perspective. But when you're able to sort of work across different disciplines and be able to understand that actually everyone has a point of view, and they all cut within one another, where is that sort of optimal point where it serves good for everyone? Because economics is pretty much managing scarcity, isn't it? You don't have
Everything.
unlimited resources or unlimited time. You need to manage it in a way that is optimal. So I think working across a broad range of things, and number two is also working in Saudi Arabia at this time, because I think it's a fascinating time, a country that is going through enormous transformation. Really, really something that probably not been seen in the last century. I think in at this scale, you want to be part of it. I'm not saying it in a cringe way, but it is actually something that history will speak about. People will be talking about this in history books 100 years, 200 years down the line, because it's very reactive to what is needed. It is responding to a well-timed need in the region, in the country and around. And also, it's at a time where the whole world is sort of, rather than going forward, if not stagnating, going backwards. So finding somewhere where there is that push, there is that drive, and you see it, and it's not just at leadership level. Everyone is talking about it. Everybody wants to be part of Vision 2030. Everybody wants to see this change. And I left Saudi Arabia for university in 2003, 2004. And I have been coming back ever since. The language that people speak, everyone you talk to really is ambitious. They want to serve, they want to change things, they want to build stuff. So it's incredible. So I think the breadth and being in Saudi Arabia are two things that I enjoy the most about my job right now.
In the other hand, what do you hate about your job? Role.
What can I is this gonna be sent to HR or
But in the role, challenges, what challenges do you have?
I think challenges, look, it's generally these jobs, they require, there's a lot of moving targets. Like, you'd be working on one thing and the aim is, but then you'd never end up project working on the same. You always end up doing something that is 180 degrees different. And I think also it's a high pressure environment. So you do end up working a lot of hours. I mean, a lot of hours. Um, and I think that is one of the things that it's where do you find that balance between your work life, your personal life, your family life, and other things that you like doing, like comedy and all that. So I think if I was to be able to get myself an ideal role, I would say, you know what, you can clog out, but unfortunately, that's the difference between a career and a job. If you have a job, you finish at 5, but if you have a career, it doesn't really adhere to working hours.
Mm.
Yeah,
How do you see your future?
it's a very good question. Look, I think the natural progression of things is you you stay somewhere and you grow until you feel that you're no longer growing where you are and you look for the next challenge. And I think, my career has always been one of those where
Mm.
I'm not just going to stay somewhere just for the sake of staying somewhere. You want to go somewhere where you can grow, where you can do, where you can bring change. And I think right now, given what's happening in the region, given what's happening in the world, I don't know. I really don't know where things are going to be in a year, 2 years time. Am I going to be here? Am I going to go back to Sudan? Am I going to go back to, but for now, I think my aim is to continue working in the policy realm, being able to disseminate knowledge of public policy, because I really think that if we are to bring that change, it can't just be done at a central level. Everyone needs to own, understanding policy, even if it's not like in a technical term. Uh, Being able to educate the public,
Mm.
being able to educate people on to having the right, ask the right questions and having the right discussions. So that's something I hope to take forward. Who knows? Maybe I might start a podcast. Who
Oh,
knows?
yeah. Doctor, comedian, podcast host. What else?
But also it's just carry on doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
That's the aim.
What your story in stand-up comedian?
Stand-up comedy. Okay. Um, I have always, and I think this is the same story that every comedian has, is that your friends always say, "Oh man, you're so funny. You always make us laugh.
Mm.
You always do that." I remember when I was in medical school, I would always, if the professor was late, they'd say, "Oh, can you go stand up and do an impression of the professor?"
Oh,
And I used to do that a lot.
the doctor of biochemistry?
Yes, I have to apologize to him if you're seeing this, Professor
Ah.
Mustafa Idris.
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
sorry. I did impressions of you. I used to do impressions of all my friends. I used to do impressions of. I think it started off doing impressions of anyone. Like I would start off by listening to, I don't know, listening to Mandela speak, and then I'd for a few days I'd start speaking like Mandela, and it was and like, oh my God, we're not to start business, like, and we'd be studying together, and instead of me doing reading the stuff in my own accent to make it entertaining, I'd start doing different accents. I'll speak like
Yeah.
Obama. We've got to work on the anatomy. The anatomy is an important thing. Only in the left side of so you'd end up doing these things, and then it sort of evolved until your friends were like, "Listen, man, you need to do stand up." And my first stand up was doing videos and voiceovers. I was doing voiceovers during the Sudanese uprising of, I do videos of Trump saying stuff to the degree that people actually thought this was Trump initially at some point. So maybe fake news was was coming out of my my bedroom. But then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna do this in 2000 and 2002. That's 2022. Sorry,
Oh.
I I went on. I got a gift from a dear friend. This is a birthday gift to join to do a comedy school, which was in London, run by Keith Palmer and Mr. C. And
Everything came back to London, huh?
yeah, I went back to London. Yeah, because it was I was not going to be able to do that in Sudan, where my family were like, "Where are you going this time?" Things over there, you can say, "I'm working." Like, I have things I need to do. So I did. So I did the stand up comedy. I did the 6 weeks course, and after it ends up with the showcase. It was a good course, but I think the showcase was really where teach techniques and thing. I remember doing the first 5 minute set, and everyone was laughing. Everyone was finding it hilarious, and I was like not as prepared as I thought I would be. And I'm like, you know what? I can deal with this. I enjoy dealing with the crowd. And you started, and the thing is, it's intermediate because you come back, you're working, you don't do it for a few months, then you go back. So I started doing some stuff in London. Some friends we were doing some charity comedy shows. We did one last year where we raised, I think, about £5,000 or £6,000 for Sudanese refugees in Egypt. And again, you just realize that this is somewhere where I feel I'm at ease on stage. Like, I know it's scary beforehand. And don't get me wrong, before I go on the stage, I think I just end up going to the toilet about 50 times. And you're like, oh my God, I don't know. Do you think that joke's okay? Is it not? And you're scared. But when you go on stage, I'm like, everything just goes down. And even using my whoop, I could see it, the stress before going on stage. It's like you at maximum stress. When you're on stage, it literally just drops.
Yeah.
So, and you're back into it. Writing is also a therapeutic, even if I think I don't use probably 90% of the stuff I write, because you end up writing for yourself sometimes. And I think a lot of people get it wrong. You're doing comedy for yourself first. Before you're doing it for anyone else, you're actually doing it for you. Before you want to make the other person laugh, you want to be having fun. And that is the genuine part of doing stand-up. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing more here in Saudi. I'm doing some in Dubai, in London. I'm doing some more shows, and hopefully aiming for 2026, some new surprises, hopefully. And we'll keep you guys tuned on that.
I need last advice for the youth to have a great career in Trump tone.
In Trump tone? Okay. Okay. It's getting done.
Career advice.
Well, just remember, you might not be like me. Okay? You need to know you might not be as good as I am, but I'm going to give you some advice that'll get you somewhere. You need to be humble, and you need to be able to learn new things very quickly. So, but no, but on a serious, I think anybody going into a career, I think be willing to explore new things all the time. Failures will happen. Failures are part of life. You're going to fail. And I have failed a lot. I failed, started a business, failed, started another business, it failed, I start careers, But be willing to learn from these experiences and be willing to build on them. Because if you get to a stage where you think, oh, I'm too senior, I'm too good to learn, it's going to stop you from learning new things. It's going to stop you from being able to build. Man, I was managed by somebody who was 10 years younger than me. I went and became an intern in my 30s, where other people were like director level at that stage in their life. But I was like, you know what? I want to learn something new. And really, it was that attitude that helped me a lot. And you know what? Be willing to explore. The whole world is the youth right now. You have way more than what we had. Man, we didn't have, when Google came out, we were like, whoa, you can use this? We had to read from books, remember at the time. But now you have podcasts, you have education just at your tips, you have AI, you have all of this. So be willing to evolve. Humans, be willing to be humble and be willing to evolve, because that's really what makes you successful as a human and makes us successful collectively as a society, as a country, and as a world, and as humanity as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.